Hello, my name is Adam with Midlane Esports. I'm here with Kevin Fair, CEO of IPlayGames. He's helping us host some Street Fighter events every Tuesday here at Midlane Esports in Logan Square. I want to thank you for coming out and helping us host these, building the community. It's really our first go at like fighting game events, so it means a lot to us. But why don't you just go into detail
hop
about
on in
yourself?
both feet. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I want to say thanks for allowing us to be here, man. Funny enough, I remember when the talks about mid lane just started a few years ago, and I mean, like, it's really great to watch what you've been able to do with the space, even through pandemic and all those other things, man. So, no, man, it's really a joy to kind of be here, man, and I'm enjoying what we've been able to create with the Street Fighter events, which, funny enough, is kind of like a homecoming for us.
Yep.
We started the company some 14, 15 years ago now. So fortunately, I don't have a lot of gray hairs, so you can't tell.
You age very well. You age very well.
But no, man, we started the company really with the excitement around Street Fighter 4 releasing back in 2009. And for me, it was a time period in my life where I was just graduated from college, but I feel like as a 22-year-old, I had my finger on the pulse on where video game and video game entertainment was going to go. And really, it was a big leap of faith, man. I had a job in accounting for one of the big four accounting firms, and so everybody wanted me to stay and do that. And I kind of felt like I had given up on trying to find something that I was really passionate about, because I got paid a really good salary straight out of college, man. So no, man, I jumped into video games, like I said, pretty much head first, because I was really passionate about it. Hearing that Street Fighter was coming back was something that got me excited to say, hey, if I was going to host some tournaments and something, Street Fighter would be a really good start.
So you really jumped in before esports was even esports.
The word didn't exist.
It was more like MLG at the time, right?
Yeah, and so that really was the only thing most of us knew as far as competitive games. And guess what? That seemed really distant from us. I'd never seen MLG come to our city before. I don't remember them having any open events. For the most part, it seemed like everything was invitational. And so, I really didn't know how you became a part of MLG. And so I think the desire and the lack of having something really drove me to say, like, let's try to have something of our own. I wanted to be like you, man. I wanted to own a venue X amount of years ago, man. And so that was all a part of the dream,
No, venues are definitely tough to open, specifically in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of loopholes that you kind of have to jump through. But so I guess, how have your goals changed from when you first started? Like, now that you've seen esports grown so much, are you mostly going to stick to like just tournament organizing? I know you're in the schools. I know you're pretty dynamic in that space. So what's changed between then and now?
Well, what's interesting is that venues were the only way that I think most of us could imagine there was a way to make money. Here's another thing to imagine. Imagine a world before Marvel Cinematic Universe 2, right? And most people are like, what are you talking about? That's always been here.
Yeah.
But honestly, what started to happen was the popular PopCon conventions that we know today were really in their infancy. Like even things that people know about, like ASIN. ASIN started in 2000 for all purpose intent, and I was in high school at the time. The popularity of those things kind of grew because, again, I think, the movies and the television products brought that to a wider audience. So these events really kind of rode the wave of the popularity and popular media for it. And so for us, I think we started to notice that there was this venue that was video game adjacent in a lot of ways, but I don't think they really understood what it took to put something on that was quality. And I think that's really where we found our niche, was that, somewhere around that 2012, 2013-ish, we really kind of found our niche working into a lot of these anime conventions as the group that was presenting themselves as the experts in video games, or at least traveling competitive scenes. And so imagine most people are like, well, hey, I know how to do it at home, but like coming to a brand new space and running it on site was something that I think we took the lead on.
And it is definitely crazy how video games and pop culture and even like traditional sports at this point are kind of just all encompassing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of cool that you kind of went the convention route and saw the growth through conventions, and you guys both kind of grew together. I guess, how did you get into the school system and the CPS, things of that nature?
So I think for me, somewhere around that same time period, around 2013, 2014, what I started noticing was that I could go to a school and ask kids, so have you guys ever been to Comic-Con? And they would go, what is that? And so not only had they never been to Comic-Con, they had never even heard of it. You know, meanwhile, specifically for us, we had Wizard World for quite some time, which is, I think, kind of morphed into Fan Expo at this point. You know, once again, ASIN as an anime convention has always been pretty popular. But here we are with a convention that was basically becoming one of the top 10 conventions in the country. And children here couldn't afford the experience. So for me, it was like, well, how do I take a piece of this experience? And if we don't do it, but for one day, how do we try to, you know, bring this experience to their schools? And so I think a lot of groups were really just happy to have kind of like this game day thing as a part of either winter break or summer break. But what I would try to convince a lot of them is that, you know, I was like, hey, you guys have kids who have a knack, or at least they're relatively talented. It would be really cool to see if we tried to put them in a space where they could compete. The other thing that I would keep pointing out was that the first computer I ever fixed was my Nintendo Entertainment System. It got wet, and I touched my first motherboard because I had taken apart this Nintendo Entertainment System. And so here I was supporting my business through the work that I was doing as a level 1 technician, and saying like, hey, well, really all of this is a learning experience in STEM. And I think that the more that I kept invoking, hey, this is science, technology, you know, and those types of things, I think more principals, more teachers became a bit more welcoming of this guy who was coming to do game day. And so, you know, that's really morphed into something special for us.
And I guess this is a two-part question, but where do you see the industry going? Because you've just seen like XQC just got, you know, like a 2-year, $100 million contract with Kick, I think it was. So you see that happening where, you know, there's some pros, but then you see some cons in the LCS where they're trying to do CBAs at this point. There's kind of a lot of money being thrown around. Some good, some in a good way, some in a bad way. I guess, where do you see the space going, and the ultimate, what is the end goal or end game for esports as a whole?
If I'm optimistic, I think the best place esports can be in is kind of like Little League World Series. Like, think of it like that. MLB exists, and all of those kids that play in the Little League World Series don't all have the biggest ambitions of being like, hey, I'm going to be a pro ball player. It's something that they're doing and experiencing in that part of life. And then what they end up getting from it is these really cool experiences in teamwork and dedication and discipline. They get to go travel and do things like that for the first time. And so guess what? Nothing messes that experience up for those kids, right? It's not so corporate that some kids don't get to experience and others do. You know, in a lot of ways, it's in a really great place where the game itself is still the most important thing. You know, and even though there's sponsorships and there's definitely exclusivity in the World Series, I'm not trying to say that, but I think that most of us all look at that experience as something that every kid should have access to, right? And I think the way that, you know, esports grows is that as long as it's presented as something that every kid should be able to have access to, the ability to learn about the technology or the telecommunication that esports has kind of become in that particular way, I think as long as we make it available for everyone to experience in some capacity, you know, I think we could forget about trying to have world domination or having the biggest esports league ever. You know, everybody is trying to basically be Pinky, and they're like, we're going to take over the world in esports. Instead, I think if we find the values that really make kids' lives better, right? You know, I had a kid that we taught him how to take apart a PlayStation. and he didn't own one.
Nice.
And I said, well, if you learn how to do this, you can have the PlayStation, right? So guess what? I get a lot of people who might learn how to take it apart, but he learned how to take it apart. He got to label all of the parts, the hard drive, the motherboard,
Nice.
USB drives. And it was a really great learning experience for him. And then he reconstructed it in like less than 20 minutes.
Wow.
So like there's an example of someone who is not looking to become a pro gamer, but they had a really great STEM experience through their desire to play video games in that way. And so I think as long as we move the industry in that direction where it's something that brings value to the next kid in line and we don't forget that part of it, I think there's room for it to grow.
No, that's definitely awesome that you're doing that, and the community is super grateful that you're doing that. I guess from a personal standpoint, where do you see IPlayGames going, and what would you like it to grow into? Is this going to be a full-fledged org, team management, sponsorships, personalities? Like what route would you take, I guess, and where do you see it?
I've been trying to champion myself. People, I think, for the lack of better terms, are like, Kevin's like the king of Chicago games. And I don't really want to be a king. Like, people compete to try to be king.
That is the truth, though.
Right? No, I don't really want that. I've been telling people I've been likening myself more to a Mr. Rogers.
Okay.
I really want to try to find a way to kind of like say, hey, like, getting into games can be a fun thing that, has varying levels of entry. And guess what? We can be a diplomatic group that finds a way for kids to want to get in it, for adults to understand why it's important. I think the work that we've been doing in the schools really has kind of transformed some of our goals from being like, well, how many conventions a year are we hosting, to how many students are going to school or graduating because of the programs that we've got, right? And I think a metric for me years from now is how many did we place in jobs, right? How many did we get to go to school and place them in technology jobs? And I think in a lot of ways will be that entry point for people to be like, man, my first esports or my first gaming experience was at school, and this group IPG came through and they helped with it. So
since you're starting from such like a grassroots space, and since you're starting at such a young demographic, you can actually grow into anything after that point. I mean, they're gonna continue to play games. They're gonna continue to grow the brand.
They're gonna want to go into broadcasting. I mean, we're gonna continue to have fun doing tournaments.
And your name's gonna be attached to all those things, since they've kind of figured out gaming and broadcasting and tech through IPlayGames.
I feel like our legacy is to take the time that, our company was built by a group of friends, and we wanted to reflect the fun that we had as a group of friends in the events that we threw. And I think our legacy in a lot of ways will be kind of continuing that goodwill of friendship, fun, learning, all of those things. I think in the long run, our legacy will be that people found a community in this. Even if it's like, well, hey, I also made my community, kids growing up making their own community. I think that's really going to be our legacy.
No, that's super, super awesome to hear. I guess my last question is, I've always wondered this about you. Around your neck, what are those beads?
Wanfu, man. No, so everybody is super familiar with the Kuma from Street Fighter.
Of course.
But Wanfu, probably.
I was gonna mention Akuma, by the way, but
no, Wanfu from Samurai Showdown probably reflects where I used to get it most. So me and my dad used to watch the Kung Fu movies together.
Oh, yeah.
So I was always a really big fan of like how disciplined the monks were, and they would use beads for counting their prayers.
Sick.
So
that's sick.
Well, the funny thing is that it also came from, I was in the time where the rap era was talking about platinum chains. Well, I couldn't afford a platinum chain, so I made something that I thought was cool and unique to me, and it just kind of stuck that way. It kind of reminded me of the time I spent with my dad, how cool the Kung Fu movies were, and it was affordable. So
nice. That's honestly all I have on my end. Again, thanks for hosting these events every week on Tuesdays. It really means a lot to us, and hopefully we'll do a lot more.
I'm excited, man. We've got a lot. I've got a lot of ideas in mind, and I think me and Kelvin are definitely going to try to make the most out of this relationship. We really appreciate you you guys opening up the space
Oh,
to
man,
us to host this. And
Easy.
it's been great seeing a lot of you guys' faces, man. If we've hit you guys before, man, definitely catch us Tuesdays at 7 o'clock right here. Mid Lane.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for tuning in. This will be up on YouTube hopefully in the next week or two.